There is a reason why the Garden Medical Spa, with 4 locations in New Jersey, has arguably the best customer reviews in America for a boutique medical spa. At the Garden Medical Spa, there is no fluff, just results. For the best in Botox, chemical peels, dermal fillers, hydrofacials, laser hair removal, and so much more, please visit thegardenmedspa.com. Book an appointment now in Voorhees, Sewell, Collingswood, or Northfield. Thegardenmedspa.com. No fluff, just results.
EAGLES, Eagles.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Legal Hands to the Face show. As always, I'm your host, Bill Colarulo. The Philadelphia Eagles are 2-0. It hasn't all been pretty, but we are sitting here after week 2, 2-0. We were worried about the Super Bowl hangover. It is a real thing. They haven't looked great, but we're 2-0, and you can't ask for much more. We're going to talk about it all. One of the main things in this 2-0 start that has me concerned is the passing game. I want to get into that. Obviously, the defense is giving up too many yards, too much points, but they've had a lot of injuries. We'll talk about that as well. Later on in the show, we are going to be joined by my man, Derek Gunn. Gunner is going to join the show. He's going to give us the inside scoop on some things that are going on. We have some injuries to talk about as well. So we're going to bring on, just like we did last week, Harvard and Duke trained medical doctor Chris Radcliffe will be joining the show. If you guys tuned in last week, you know how bright this guy is. So we're going to break down all the injuries with Dr. Radcliffe. I told Dr. Radcliffe before the season I was hoping to never have to talk to him on this show on Monday nights, and now we got him back-to-back weeks because for a team that was so healthy last season, this Philadelphia Eagles team is getting the injury bug early, but maybe that's a good thing. Let's get it out of the way early. I also want to hit you guys with a trivia question like I do every single week, and I'll give you the answer at the end of the show. So here's the Philadelphia Eagles trivia question before we get started. In the top 10 for the most points scored in a regular season by a Philadelphia Eagle, the top 9 are all kickers. Who is number 10? Who is the only non-kicker in the top 10 for the most points scored? And we'll talk about that at the end of the show. Leave a comment if you're there. And guys, real quick, before we get into it, if you're not already following Legal Hands to the Face on all your social media platforms, head on over to Instagram, TikTok. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, be sure that you're following Legal Hands to the Face. We post daily content. We bring this show every Monday, 6:30 on the JAKIB Sports Network, but we bring daily content to all of our social media channels. And if you're not already subscribed to the JAKIB Sports Network, make sure you are. They have great shows. Our guest later today, Derek Gunn, he does Sports Take every day with Rob Ellis. We also co-host the pregame and halftime shows down at the Ocean Casino, live streamed here on JAKIB Sports with the one and only Seth Joyner, Mark Farzetta, Mike Missinelli. So they got some great shows across the network. So be sure to check out the JAKIB Sports Network. Producing for me tonight is my man, Tone DeShields. He also does a great show here on the network. So make sure, if you're not already subscribed to JAKIB Sports, do it. And a quick thank you to our sponsor, the Garden Medical Spa. But let's get right into it. This Philadelphia Eagles, I see Michael Heft in the comments saying it's a scary 2-0. And it has been a scary 2-0 because this Philadelphia Eagles offense, something is off. Something is off. And really the question today is, who is most to blame for this Philadelphia Eagles passing game to look so off? Is it Jalen Hurts? Is it head coach Nick Sirianni? Or is it the new offensive coordinator, Brian Johnson? I mean, you look at Jalen Hurts in the first 2 games, he is only averaging 181 yards in the air. He only has 2 touchdowns, and he had that one really bad interception last week. And you look at his 2022 numbers, he came out of the gate so strong last season, averaging 288 yards in his first 2 games. So he's 100 yards off what he was averaging last year. And it's not passing the eye test. It just doesn't look like they have any sort of rhythm. I went back and I watched the all 22 of the game against the Vikings, and it is clear Jalen Hurts has absolutely no trust in his pocket right now. No trust. He's been sacked 7 times in 2 games, but he is immediately dropping back, going to his first read, and then he's not trusting the pocket, running immediately without looking downfield to see any open receivers. And that was the knock on him coming out of college. I actually went back today and I read his NFL draft analysis coming out of Oklahoma. Weaknesses: inconsistent patience, allowing routes to develop, missing checkdowns and opts for harder throws, needs to get better at trusting his pocket, quick to drop his eyes when pressure mounts, and more likely to void the pocket than climb it, scan, and throw from the pocket. It's amazing to me that all of these things that were negatives and weaknesses of his coming out of Oklahoma have reared their ugly head again. These were things we expected from rookie Jalen Hurts. But in his first full year as a starter, you saw him grow so much. And last year, do all of those things better. Wasn't rushing out of the pocket, keeping his eyes down the field, scanning the field, going through his reads and his progressions. And he's not doing it right now. And I don't know how much of it is that he's rusty or that he's going against some pretty good defensive minds. Look, let me get this out of the way. I am one of the biggest Jalen Hurts fans out there. I've been high on him since he came out of Oklahoma. I've been so excited that the Philadelphia Eagles were able to get him because of the intangibles that he had. And you saw it last year with how hard he works, that he got better. But this year, he looks like the old Jalen Hurts. And I'm not a Jalen Hurts hater. And I see Anthony Kramer weighing in. He will shut the haters up. I agree. I think you're going to see the Jalen Hurts that we saw last year. He's going to get things right. But right now, he has regressed to all of the weaknesses that we saw of his coming out of college that allowed the Eagles to take him in the second round. And I went and watched that all 22. It's not all on Jalen Hurts, and we're going to get there in a second because I do not like not only the play calling by Brian Johnson, but the play designs by Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson going into both of these games against a Patriots and Vikings defense. So we'll talk about that in a second. But let's end the Jalen Hurts conversation with a positive. We talked about his draft analysis and what his weaknesses are. Well, guess what his strengths were, according to the draft analysts coming out of college? A leader and a winner. He was 38-4 as a college quarterback. That was his starting record, 38-4. And what have you seen in the last 2 games? Eagles offense may not be firing on all cylinders, but the Eagles are 2-0. And Jalen Hurts is leading that 2-0 charge. And in the last 25 games, this was put out by JAKIB Sports on their social media. In the last 25 games, Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni are 22-3. So I do think that he's going to get things right. But Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson, they got to help him out a little bit. I mean, we'll talk about the play calling, but let's take a look at some of the play designs, because these play designs are leaving a lot to be desired. There were a few times in the game against Minnesota, Eagles come out in 12 personnel with 2 tight ends. They then go to max protection, meaning both tight ends are staying in. There's only 2 wide receivers in the route, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Well, what was the defense that Brian Flores and the Vikings were running? They were running a 2-high safety cover 4. They had a 3-3-5, meaning 3 down linemen, 3 linebackers, and 5 defensive backs on the field. And 5 defensive backs were playing 10 yards off the ball. And they were just sitting. It was the same defense we saw Bill Belichick run. And what the play designs were, max protection, and they have both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith running 9 routes straight up the field. Well, as soon as he drops back and you have 5 corners sitting in a cover 4, there's nowhere to go with the ball. You're not giving him any hot routes. You're not giving him any other options. You're max protecting, but there's nowhere to go with the football. I did not like the play designs at all. And the other plays that they just have to get away from, the bubble screens, they are not working. They are not going to work against a 3-3-5 defense when you have 5 defensive backs on the field. And the problem is, Jalen Hurts and that offensive line are so athletic. The Eagles not only have one of the most dominant offensive lines in the NFL, they have one of the most athletic offensive lines in the NFL. And I have been screaming for a couple of years now to bring back the screen game, but not the bubble screen game. So when they design those plays, and this is why I have such a problem with the play designs of Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson. When they're designing these bubble screens and you're throwing a quick pass out to A.J. Brown or a quick pass out to Dallas Goedert, you are not giving your dominant offensive line any time to get out on the perimeter to try to get their blocks downfield on some of these smaller defensive backs. So when they run those bubble screens, guess who your lead blocker was on those screens? Olamide Zaccheaus. Anyone want to guess how big Olamide Zaccheaus is? He's 5'8", 194 pounds, and you have him on the outside as a lead blocker for Dallas Goedert and A.J. Brown on a bubble screen when you have 2 future Hall of Famers on your offensive line in Lane Johnson and Jason Kelce. You got one of the best left tackles in the league in Jordan Mailata. You got Landon Dickerson at left guard, and you have Cam Jurgens, who's really starting to play well at that right guard position. Why are you throwing a bubble screen with Olamide Zaccheaus as your lead blocker? Or worse, Quez Watkins, or even Devontae Smith. Use your offensive line. I am all for the screen game. Set it up and give your offensive line time to get on the perimeter so that they can start to block some of these smaller players. Those are the problems I have with the game plan. Another example, and I can go probably all night because I was throwing things at the screen watching that all 22. 3rd and goal from the 8-yard line. The Philadelphia Eagles call a zone read with Jalen Hurts with 0 receivers in the route. No pass option. So they run a basically RPO with no P in the RPO. It's basically just a read option with no one to throw the ball to from the 8-yard line. So Hurts rides DeAndre Swift. The end starts to crash, so Hurts pulls it to go around the outside. Well, they're just sitting there in their defense, and there's no one to throw the ball to. He gets tackled, no gain. They got to settle for a field goal. So it's these play designs that the Philadelphia Eagles have to fix. And they've had a long week. We're 2-0. We got 10-day break right now. But we know what the formula is. Bill Belichick and Brian Flores pretty much did the same thing. They come out in nickel, dime, they run a 2-high safety, cover 4 look, and they are sitting back. They are occasionally bringing pressure with their linebackers, but most of the time they're all just sitting there. And you got these 5 D-backs 10 yards off the ball. You saw Bill Belichick do something similar last night to the Miami Dolphins, but Mike McDaniel had a great counter for it. They started throwing short passes to Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill had a great night last night, didn't have a play longer than 15 yards. So it's up to this Philadelphia Eagles coaching staff. I'm not absolving Jalen Hurts. We talked about his struggles at the beginning of the show. I'm not absolving him. But this offense and this coaching staff have to come up with a better game plan. You know what these defenses are going to throw at you now. You know they're going to come out in nickel and dime packages. So now figure out how to beat it. And what did the Eagles do? I'm going to give Brian Johnson some credit now. They realized, hey, we're not going to be able to throw. We're not going to be able to throw against this nickel and dime cover 4. So let's pound the rock. And that's what they did. You look at the New England game, they only gave their running backs 16 carries. And Gee Jr. hit the nail on the head. Run the ball. Exactly. And they only gave their running backs 16 carries in week 1 against the New England Patriots. Against the Minnesota Vikings, they realized, hey, we can't throw the ball. And they gave their running backs 36 carries in that game. And you saw DeAndre Swift have a career night. 28 carries, 175 yards. He had an average yards per carry of 6.25. Impressive. And that's what the Eagles have to do. I know the Eagles want to come out early, throw the ball, put up points, and then establish the run. We got to switch that mindset. We need to establish the run, and then we'll be able to pass off of it, because these teams are not going to let you get the big play anymore. They're going to come out in those nickel and dime packages. And if they want to sit there in a too high safety look, pound the ball down their throat like you did against the Minnesota Vikings. They had a 16-play drive, and the Philadelphia Eagles ran the ball 13 times. Do it. Keep doing it until a team shows that they can stop it. And then once they start to creep those safeties down, now you can take your shot over the top to DeAndre Swift, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert. But you're going to have to establish that run first. But I want to talk about DeAndre Swift as well, because there is one thing that concerned me, is what a game. What a game. He showed that not only does he have the patience to wait for his blockers, he also was decisive in hitting the holes when they opened up. And he has that home run potential that we all grew accustomed to with Miles Sanders last year. But there's one thing that concerns me, is the amount of carries that they gave DeAndre Swift. I know Kenny Gainwell was hurt. Let's hope he comes back this week. We're going to talk to Dr. Ratcliffe later in the show about it. But you look at DeAndre Swift. First of all, he's only gone over 100 yards in his career 4 times in the previous 3 seasons. One of them was against the Eagles in week 1 last year. You all remember that, when he went for 144 yards. But he's only gone over 100 yards 4 times. But what's more concerning to me is he's only had more than 15 carries twice in his career. And here's what my concern is. You look at 2020. The one game he had more than 15 carries, he had 16 carries. He missed the next 3 games due to injury. In 2022, he had 15 carries against the Eagles in week 1. He followed that up with 5 carries in week 2, 7 carries in week 3, and then he got hurt and he missed 3 more games. And then he only had more than 8 carries 2 more times the entire season. So the Philadelphia Eagles have to, yes, give Swift the ball. Give him the ball. But you cannot give him 28 touches. I know this was a unique situation. Gainwell was hurt. Boston Scott was out with a concussion. But you're going to have to bring in some sort of other running back that can carry the ball. And I think it will be Kenny Gainwell, but you got to feature DeAndre Swift. I think the magic number for Swift would be 12 to 15 touches a game is what I would like to see. And you got to get him more involved in the passing game as well. But I think if you try to give this guy 25 touches a game, he's not going to last very long, because you just look at the history and he's never been able to do it in his career. But we talked about the game plan. We talked about Jalen Hurts, and we got to talk about Brian Johnson as a play caller. It is just something that is an art that you don't know if you are good at until you do it. Shane Steichen was masterful at running plays last year, at calling plays, knowing what time to dial up the right play. And more importantly than that, he knew how to get Jalen Hurts into a rhythm that would carry over for the entire game. You haven't seen that yet with Brian Johnson. And this is because the guy's never called plays in the NFL. I still have confidence that he's going to figure it out and he's going to be able to do it. And what a luxury as an offensive coordinator to be able to turn to your stud offensive line and your running game when things aren't going well. But if we want to start to beat these better teams, Brian Johnson has to get better as a play caller. We knew this was going to be a transition. Not only did the Philadelphia Eagles lose Shane Steichen, offensive coordinator, and look what he's doing in Indianapolis. They win yesterday. Anthony Richardson, he gets hurt. Gardner Minshew mania going on in Indianapolis. He comes back. They win that game. And you just saw he's a good play caller. But they also lost Jonathan Gannon. And say what you will about Jonathan Gannon, losing both coordinators is a very tough thing to overcome. In fact, the Philadelphia Eagles are only the third team since 1994 to have to replace both coordinators after a Super Bowl appearance. The 2004 Patriots had to do it, and the 1994 San Francisco 49ers had to do it. So it's not an easy task by any means. So the fact that we're sitting here 2-0, coming off of a Super Bowl hangover, coming off replacing both offensive and defensive coordinator, and with our MVP quarterback really not playing well, I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it. And let's jump over to the other side of the ball, the defense. For a team that was so healthy last year, you look at the injuries we've already had. In the preseason, Zach McPherson tears his Achilles, out for the year. Sean Bradley, not sure how much he was going to play on defense, but a really solid special teams player. He's out for the year. This game, they lose James Bradbury against the Minnesota Vikings, going up against the best wide receiver in the league in Justin Jefferson, a really talented rookie in Jordan Addison, and that tight end, TJ Hawkinson, who we know what he can do. You also lose Nakobe Dean. You lose your starting safety, Reed Blankenship. And then to make things even worse, in the middle of the game, you lose Avonte Maddox to a torn pectoral muscle. We're going to talk to Dr. Radcliffe about that later in the show. There's some reports that maybe his season isn't over. We'll find out what the likelihood of that is. But let me digress for 1 second. Avonte Maddox, man, the guy cannot stay healthy. He's only played more than 12 games one time in his career. He played a 16-game season a couple years ago. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And unfortunately, they backloaded his contract like Howie Roseman likes to do. His cap hit this year was $4 million. If the Eagles bring him back next year, his cap hit would balloon to $10 million. There's no way they're going to bring him back on that deal. If they cut or trade him with a post-June 1st designation, they would save $7.5 million. I cannot imagine they bring back a guy as injury-prone as he has been. But, yeah, Mark DeStefano saying, was Matt an injury-friendly fire? It's hard to say. He was doing it on the tackle, so he got caught up, tore his pectoral muscle as he was holding on to make the tackle, so it's tough to say. It's unfortunate, though, because when he's on the field, he's one of the best nickel corners in the NFL. He just can't stay on the field. But you look at this defense, and you want to give them some sort of slack here. They've had a lot of injuries, new defensive coordinator, but they let Kirk Cousins put up 364 yards and 4 touchdowns. They let Mac Jones put up 316 yards and 3 touchdowns. In 2 games, the opposing quarterbacks have a 67% completion rate, 680 yards passing, and 7 touchdowns. That's not going to cut it when we get into that gauntlet around week 9 going against the top quarterbacks in the NFL with, I'm going to put Dak in there. He's playing well. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. These guys are going to be able to pick apart this defense if you're letting Mac Jones and Kirk Cousins do it. But what was interesting is you look at all these injuries. Nakobe Dean goes down in week 1. Christian Ellis steps in and plays linebacker. Well, the Eagles must not have been happy with the way he played because he only got 4 snaps against the Minnesota Vikings. They gave 95% of the reps to Nicholas Morrow, who stepped in and actually played pretty well. So I expect to see more of Morrow at the linebacker position. We're going to take a break in a minute, but I just want to get through this real quick. Reed Blankenship not playing in the game against the Vikings. Everyone was so hopeful we were now going to see Sidney Brown at that safety position. Sidney Brown's going to step in. It's his time to shine. Well, Sidney Brown only played 4 snaps on defense against the Minnesota Vikings. Justin Evans played 100% of the snaps on defense, and Terrell Edmonds, the safety from Pittsburgh, played 91%. So Sidney Brown must not be ready because he still didn't get his opportunity. And then the other interesting thing was no James Bradbury, no Avonte Maddox. The Eagles don't turn to the rookies Eli Ricks or Keely Ringo. Each one of those guys only gets one snap in this game. They turn to Josh Jobe, who we knew was going to get the start over with Bradbury out, and Mario Goodrich. So now with Avonte Maddox maybe being out for the season, we'll find out from Dr. Radcliffe, who's going to be your safety? Who are they going to let step in there? Who's going to be your nickel corner? Looks like Reed Blankenship will hopefully be back, but who's going to be your nickel? Do they give Eli Ricks a shot? Do they give Keely Ringo a shot? We will see. But we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to have the one and only Derek Gunn on the show. So we're going to get his opinion on some of these things. Who does he think is to blame for this Philadelphia Eagles passing offense looking a little off kilter here? But we'll talk to D Gunn. We'll be back in a couple minutes, guys. Stay tuned.
There is a reason why the Garden Medical Spa, with 4 locations in New Jersey, has arguably the best customer reviews in America for a boutique medical spa. At the Garden Medical Spa, there is no fluff, just results. For the best in Botox, chemical peels, dermal fillers, hydrofacials, laser hair removal, and so much more, please visit thegardenmedspa.com. Book an appointment now in Voorhees, Sewell, Collingswood, or Northfield. Thegardenmedspa.com. No fluff, just results.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let JAKIB Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio, or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call JAKIB Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428.
Heading down the shore, have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wild wood days.
Score and save in southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com. EAGLES, Eagles.
Derek Gunn to the show. What's up, Gunner?
What's up, Bill? How you doing, man?
It's good to see you, man. It's good to see you. For those of you who tuned into the pregame show on JAKIB Sports or the postgame show, you know, me and Derek Gunn are down at the Ocean Casino every week having some fun before the games. Well, it hasn't been as much fun as it usually is because the Eagles are 2-0, but we're not as happy as we should be, Gunner. So tell everybody why they should calm down.
Well, we're never, Bill, you have to understand. So you're a newcomer to our group. We're never 100% happy, okay? We always see things that can be worked on and improved. But the fact that this team is not played perfect football, and for nobody has. But the good thing is this team is 2-0 with a lot of room for improvement, and they will improve. To what degree remains to be seen, but it'd rather be 2 up than 2 down. I mean, when you think about teams, Cincinnati's 0-2, although Cincinnati did start 0-2 last year. There's a lot of offers out there, man, people understand, people want to see what they saw last year. And everybody across, media platforms have tried to tell the fan base, what you saw last year is not going to be the same thing that you see this year. Defensively, you got a whole new component of defensive players. Offensively, as I've talked about all summer long leading into the season, coordinators have had all summer to study this Eagles offense. And you come out of the gate and you played the best of the best in Belichick. You play one of his disciples in Brian Flores. And now you're going to play another outstanding coordinator in Todd Bowles. So the road to get to where you want to go is not as easy as it was a season ago.
Yeah, but like you said, 2-0 is 2-0, so we will take it. But my question, though, is obviously the offense is a little off. And I know you mentioned they played Belichick and they played Brian Flores, but it's more than just the defensive coordinators they're playing. I mean, who do you think shares a majority of the responsibility here for the Eagles? Is it Sirianni? Is it Brian Johnson? Is it Jalen Hurts? Is it a combination? Why hasn't the passing game been as good as it's been back in 22?
Well, to answer your game is yes, yes, and yes. Now to go a little bit further, if you look at both Minnesota and New England, what they did was they decided to play more secondary personnel to defend against the big play. And when you look at how the defensive ends have been playing them, last season you had a lot of DNs that were crashing trying to get to Jalen Hurts, which allowed him to either hand up the ball or step up and run. In this case, because the DNs are stopping, it is allowing the backers to fill lanes a lot quicker. That's why you don't see a lot of those open lanes anymore. You don't see a lot of the backers just floating out to the outside. When Jalen has tried to dip to the outside, then you see the pursuit go to the outside. The edge containment bounces off the tackle and pursues, and the linebackers looping around him to stretch Jalen Hurts out. That's why you've seen Jalen Hurts sit down a lot of times instead of trying to turn and get up the field. He's had a couple of called quarterback runs that have worked okay for him. But for the most part, after 2 games, the Eagles have to say, okay, they're attacking us in the RPO a lot differently. So now we have to counter. So they've had extended time off since last Thursday. They will have had 11 days off until they get ready to play this Tampa Bay defense. And let's face it, it is a good defense. When Tampa Bay is healthy, they are a very good defense. They went through a lot of injuries last year, which in part led to their demise, along with the offensive line. But Todd Bowles at the helm. The defense is healthy early in the season. It's going to make for an interesting battle on Monday night.
Yeah, they got some playmakers on that defensive side of the ball. That's for sure. But look, we know the offense is struggling for the reasons you talked about. And I went back and watched some of the all 22, and I don't really necessarily like some of the play designs either. But like you said, they got 11 days to figure this out. But let's jump over to the other side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball. In the pregame show, Seth Joyner said to us he thought Christian Ellis was going to have a really big game. Mm-hmm. Well, the Philadelphia Eagles come out and they give Christian Ellis 4 defensive snaps. Did you find that surprising?
Yeah. Considering they went into that game with 3 outside linebackers and no true middle linebacker. But the fact that he got 4 snaps was a little bit perplexing. As to why, no one's really found out why. Was he hurt? Was he not 100%? Do they not trust him? Your mind can wander in 20 different directions in terms of the whys and why nots of what they think of Christian Ellis. Now, if it happens again this coming Monday night, the volume of questions and speculation are going to increase. The media guys, like I know them well in Philadelphia, they're going to start probing a little bit deeper. It's going to irk Sirianni. It's going to irk Sirianni the way it did when he was initially talking about the incident that flared up on the sideline with AJ and Jalen Hurts, or he's going to say, hey, look, guys, it's just a situational situation. Body language says a lot, in terms of how you respond to certain things, certain situations. So I'm waiting to see exactly what happens with the defensive scheme and how much Christian Ellis gets to play on Monday night.
Yeah, I was excited to see Ellis because when he's on the field, man, he's flying around. So I was expecting some big things from him against Minnesota as well, 4 snaps. But I will say, Nicholas Morrow, who wasn't even on the team week 1, was sitting down there on the practice squad, I thought had a pretty good game on Thursday night.
Yeah, he came in here as a potential starter on the weak side, no guaranteed money. And as training camp progressed, all of a sudden he's on the second team, he's on the third team, and all of a sudden he gets cut. Then he's brought back to the practice squad. So that initially tells you that Nicholas Morrow wasn't exactly what they looked for. When he came here, people were saying, well, look, oh, man, he had 108 tackles. My question was, how many of those tackles were downfield? See, you can have 200 tackles, but if you're not making an impact at the line of scrimmage, or you're not disruptive in somebody's backfield, just how effective are you being at that position? So whatever he wasn't doing correctly, it got him demoted. Now, out of necessity, one man's injury is another man's opportunity. Now, out of necessity, all of a sudden he's elevated back again. And maybe that was a wake-up call for him. So he's playing without guaranteed money. He's playing for a future contract. And somewhere in his mind, he's got to be thinking, this team, I don't know if they really trust me or not. I've got to go out here and win their trust all over again. So he's got a proverbial chip on his shoulder, and it's understandable why.
Yeah, and people are asking in the chat if the Eagles are going to make a move at linebacker. There was also talks about as soon as Budda Baker was deactivated from the game, they're going to go get Budda Baker. He just went on IR. Yep. Are you hearing anything? I mean, you never know what Howie Roseman, are you hearing anything that he's going to make a move for either a linebacker or safety help?
Howie is always looking to make a move of some kind, but he's not just going to make a move for headlines. It's got to be something that fits what they're trying to do. And when you really think about it, Bill, there's not a whole lot out there to get right now. The Eagles have 12 or 13 picks coming up in next spring's draft. I don't see the Eagles drafting 12 or 13 players next year. So somewhere along the line, especially if players keep falling by the wayside, I can see Howie trying to bundle up some of these picks to get somebody he really wants. It may not be a frontline player. It may be like a GJ situation. Somebody who comes in here to finish out a 1-year contract. If the Eagles deem him worthy enough to try to keep, they'll make a push for him at the end of the season. If not, he'll serve a purpose for this season. But Howie's always looking. Do I know definitively who's he looking at or what position? No, at this time. But I know Howie well enough to know the man never sleeps. I said it jokingly time and time again. I think he hangs upside down like a bat just to recharge. And he's always constantly on the phone with somebody trying to find out, what do you have that you want to get rid of and what might it cost me?
Yeah, you talk about Howie Roseman too. He had such a great draft this past draft, and it was a little surprising to me that we didn't see one of those draft picks on Thursday night, and that was Sidney Brown. I know a lot of people were hopeful Sidney Brown was going to get more reps at the safety position with Reed Blankenship down. He only played 4 snaps. Mm-hmm. What do you think it is that's holding Sidney Brown back from getting on the field on that defense?
As athletic and as talented as he is, maybe the defensive coaches are telling us he's not quite ready to assume an expanded role. Everybody just fell in love with the kid when they saw him, making big hits in preseason games, so on and so forth. But you know what? He plays at such a high speed and sometimes with reckless abandon that maybe he has to be fine-tuned a little bit more. One of the knocks coming out of college was sometimes he over-pursues a play and he misses tackles, or he's always trying to make the big hit and he misses the definitive tackle. Those little traits can add up to big things at this level. So maybe they're telling you that right now, even with all the injuries they have, he's not right where we want him to be in terms of putting him on the back end of that defense. And, of course, after what we saw in this last game against Minnesota, they're going to have to rely on a lot of youth until they get some of the guys back. Nakobe Dean. Even Blankenship is not guaranteed. Blankenship is going to play Monday night because of this rib injury, usually with a concussion protocol. If they get Bradbury back, that's huge for Bradbury, especially matching up against the likes of Mike Evans on Monday night. We're not 100% sure Bradbury's going to be back quite yet. So they're going to have to rely on some of these young players again coming up Monday night. Hopefully, City is closer to being ready than not, because I do think before the season is over, he's going to have a much more expanded, definitive role on that defense.
Yeah, that's one of the concerns I had too when everybody was throwing the name Budda Baker out. As good of a player as Budda Baker is, I don't want to see a guy come in and stunt the development of either Sidney Brown or Reed Blankenship, because I don't know if Eagles fans are truly appreciating how good Reed Blankenship looked all preseason. Let's hope he's healthy as well. Have you heard anything about whether or not he's going to play on Monday night?
As of right now, it's 50-50, and here it is. It's only Tuesday. And when you have a rib injury, especially one that can keep you out of a game, you have to be careful how soon you put somebody back out on the field, because one good shot, again, the next game, and all of a sudden he's out 3 or 4 games. With modern technology being what it is and all these electronic stimulus and all this stuff, you can work those muscles back into shape and get that swelling and bruising down a lot quicker nowadays. But from a medical standpoint, the trainers and the doctors, you have to identify where it's located, number one, and if he comes back too soon, are we looking at the possibility of being out 3, 4, 5 games instead of 1 game or 2 game possibly? Luckily, the extended time gives these guys a chance to heal. Fletcher Cox had a rib injury. He played with it. Now, obviously, his wasn't as severe as, Reed Blankenship. But they're not going to put any player out there sooner rather than later. And let's face it, in a day and age where everybody's trying to get younger to get better, I still believe the Eagles have enough veteran presence on their defense to disguise some of the deficiencies they may have in other areas. Middle of the linebacking situation and on the back end of the defense, especially if Bradbury comes back. You got 2 Pro Bowl cornerbacks. You got Pro Bowlers in the trenches. So you got enough to get you through. Tampa Bay is not the upper echelon team, although they're off to a 2-0 start and they're playing well. Tampa Bay is not Kansas City, Buffalo, one of those teams, So you can get through another game without having all of your frontline guys.
Yeah, you just mentioned Fletcher Cox battling that rib injury as well. I asked you in the pregame if you thought maybe he wouldn't play as much because of that rib injury. Man, is he a beast. He went from playing 62% of the snaps against the Patriots, comes in questionable against the Vikings, and he plays 76% of the snaps.
Yes.
And I really think, tell me if you agree, the addition of Jalen Carter on this team has rejuvenated Fletcher Cox, saying, hey, look, I'm still the guy.
I think it's Jalen Carter. I believe it's Jordan Davis. I believe it's Milton Williams. Fletcher knows he's the elder statesman on that defensive line. He knows he's got 1 foot in retirement right now. That retirement rocking chair is starting to squeak a little bit for him. He understands that. But, sometimes when you have a bunch of kids around you, you want to get out there and prove that, you can still battle with these young kids. So I do believe the youth movement has motivated him. And, of course, he's a teacher of these guys as well. What's the best way to teach? By example. Learn by example. I'm not just going to tell you how to do it. I'm going to show you I can still do it. And because that rotation has been so well, it has kept him a lot fresher in games. Even though he's played 72% of the snaps, look at the way he's played, especially in the fourth quarter. We're seeing a fresher Fletcher Cox. Now, Fletcher Cox to me has made more noise in the fourth quarter in 2 games than he has earlier in the 2 games, and maybe it's because of that reason. Fletcher Cox doesn't have to play every down anymore. And the Fletcher Cox I know has always played through pain that has sidelined some other guys. So when he was out there, I wasn't surprised one bit that he was out there. The fact that he played 72% of the snaps, I was a little bit surprised, but Fletcher knew he needed to be out there, especially when the Vikings started getting a little bit closer. You need that veteran presence out there.
Yeah, and speaking of another veteran that's supposed to be a dominant force along that defensive line is Hassan Reddick, and he really hasn't done much in the first 2 games. Is that thumb injury affecting his ability to get after the quarterback?
I believe it is. What's number one, his speed is his first big trait. Number 2, when he attacks, you need those hands to extend, to punch those tackles on the shoulder pads and redirect them in a direction you want them to go so you can make you move the other way. I don't think the thumb is allowing him to do that, fully yet. And it may take a couple of more games before he's all the way back. But yes, when you fracture something like that, especially in the latter part of a training camp, it's not going to be 100% coming right out of the gate. Now, eventually it's going to heal, and eventually I expect to see the Hassan Reddick that we knew and loved from 2022. But I think right now that thumb definitely has an effect on how he attacks the shoulders of offensive tackles.
Yeah, and another defensive end that everybody was excited to see was Nolan Smith. He only played, I think, 6 snaps against the Vikings, 7 snaps against the Patriots. Yeah. Is he another guy like Sidney Brown who's just not ready, or is that shoulder injury affecting his ability to get on the field?
It's funny. I asked a couple of people in the know inside the organization. I said, hey, wait a minute. Nolan played 7 snaps in the first game and played like 4 snaps the second game. What's the problem? Is it his shoulder? And the response I got was, he's a great kid. His turn will come. So based on that, it's telling me it's not the shoulder. You know, ever since he jokingly made that comment, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You know, people have been closely watching this to see. And of course, then shortly after that, they kept him out of 4 consecutive practices. You know, so people are wondering, is it the shoulder? From what I'm gathering, he's not ready yet to assume a bigger role, which tells you how far he must be, considering Hassan Reddick has a thumb issue. He hasn't been able to attack the way we like to see him attack. And yet, instead of getting Hassan off the field a little bit more, they're keeping him on the field and getting Nolan Smith on the field less. So that tells me Sean Desai, Matt Patricia are not 100% satisfied with where he is right now in terms of technique and knowing his responsibilities.
Yeah, they don't have trust in these rookies, it looks like, outside of Jalen Carter, because when Avonte Maddox went down on Thursday night, a lot of people, again, calling, hey, it's Eli Ricks' time. It's who's the other corner they got? Keely Ringo. It's his time. Neither one of those guys plays more than 1 snap. Similar situation there. These guys just aren't ready to get on the field. They don't trust them yet.
I don't know if it's that could very well be the case, but you look at who they had on the field against Minnesota on the back end. It looked like the Keystone Cops running around back there, except for Darius Slay. You know, Darius Slay has to take the onus of settling these guys down, as Malcolm Jenkins did when he had to go through that, like in 2018 and 2019 with a bunch of young players. Malcolm took him to a point and said, hey, look, I've coached you guys up enough. I'm not coaching you up anymore. Now it's time to let you go. I don't know if Darius Slay has assumed that same role that a Malcolm Jenkins did. But Darius Slay needs to coach these guys up and calm them down, and then you turn them loose. You know, but this past game was a little helter-skelter. And because we don't know whose role will be defined and for how long, you know, you've got to get that thing fixed. You can navigate through these teams you're playing like right now, the New Englands, the Minnesotas, and the Tampa Bays. But sure enough, you're going to face the Kansas Cities, the Buffaloes, the San Franciscos. And if you're going to be relying on these kids, you better make sure they're up to speed in a hurry.
Yeah, and we say they can navigate through them, but you look at what not Baker Mayfield. Let's hope he doesn't do what these guys did. But you look at what Mac Jones and Kirk Cousins did. Both of these guys looked like all-pro quarterbacks, putting up yardage, their completion percentage, touchdowns. You know, who do you think they're going to roll out there if James Bradbury's back at that slot corner position on Monday night?
Probably Job. Job will probably play the outside spot if they put Bradbury in the slot. It would definitely be Job on the outside. Now, again, if I'm an offense and I see Job out there, what am I going to do? I'm going to test him because he doesn't have a lot of game experience. You know, a good offensive coordinator will identify in a hurry where the potential weak link is. You know, and if that's the case, you know Slay is going to have Mike Evans. So on the other side, you're going to have Chris Godwin against Job and hopefully some help over the top. But their communications had better be on point because Chris Godwin can stick his foot in the turf and turn around and make you look bad on his highlight reel in a hurry. So, you know, I'd be surprised if it's not Job. Unless Job has some type of injury we're not privileged to right now, that's the way I see him lining up if they decide to put Bradbury at their slot position.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about Monday night. Eagles are, I think, a 6.5-point favorite going in. You think the Eagles come out of there 3-0?
Yes. Yes, I do. Baker Mayfield has played extremely well the first 2 games. But Baker Mayfield is also a Jekyll and Hyde. He can play like a Pro Bowler one game and play like he's about to flush down the toilet bowl the next game. You know, the one thing that he does better than Mac Jones and Kirk Cousins is he will scramble and buy time. He can scramble. He can get out and run. And he can run. He can throw on the move also. You know, so they've got to be able to defend against that. I don't think Tampa Bay is going to be able to run much. Although they ran pretty well this past game, I don't think they're going to be able to run with any type of efficiency against this Eagles defensive front. But because of those 2 wide receivers they have, you know, if Baker has time to throw, he hasn't turned the ball over once in 2 games, which is unlike Baker Mayfield. So he hasn't turned the ball over. So he's obviously confident in the guys blocking for him. He's obviously confident in Mike Evans. Mike Evans, since he's been in the league, 9 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, and look at the numbers he just put up in the last game. So, you know, there's a chemistry there already between those two. You know, but you cannot allow Baker Mayfield to stand in that pocket and pat the ball and survey the situation down the field, or it's going to be a closer game than it should be.
Yeah, Mike Evans, man. I was looking at his stats today. 9 seasons with 1,000 yards. I said, oh, is he on pace to do it for a 10th straight year? Now, he's on pace to have 2,000 yards receiving this year after the first 2 games he had. So he's concerning to me. Chris Godwin is concerning. The good news for the Eagles, the tight end position, which is a position they struggled with 2 weeks in a row, the Bucs don't really have a stud tight end like the Vikings and the Patriots did, thankfully.
No, but this tight end had a decent game this past game. And if I'm an offensive coordinator, I don't care who I'm lining up at tight end, I've got to test the middle of the field. That was the weak area of this Eagles defense last year when they were a dominant defense, and it's a glaring weakness on this defense this year. It's in terms of defending the middle of the field. So whether this guy's a Pro Bowler or not, you have to test him to give the Eagles defense something else to think about. Can Desai and Patricia devise a plan to defend better in the middle of the field? I don't know, especially if you're playing a lot of kids on the back end, because their heads are already going to be swimming as it is in terms of what's my assignment? Where am I supposed to be? Am I in the right place? Did I hear the right call? So on and so forth. So with that said, if I'm Tampa Bay, I'm dinking and dunking my way down the field until I found it exactly where I can attack with more efficiency.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be the formula for them. But let's hope maybe we get Reed Blankenship back. Maybe we get who else is coming back from injury back there?
Bradbury.
Yeah, James Bradbury. Because if Slay's on an island with Mike Evans, I don't know if I trust Chris Godwin up against Josh Jobe, but he didn't play horrible against the Vikings, but we will see. Now, last question for you. Turn into this Tampa Bay Bucs team again. That defense is better than I think a lot of people are giving them credit for. Do you see this being the game where Jalen Hurts starts to look like the Jalen Hurts of old in the passing game, or do you think this Tampa Bay defense is going to be too good and they're going to be able to shut them down?
I don't know about shutting them down, but Todd Bowles, you can say what you want to say about Todd Bowles as a head coach, but as a defensive coordinator, he's one of the most respected DCs in all of pro football. He loves to play that Tampa 2 defense where you have 2 high safeties, and he's got a trio of linebackers, I think, that are just as good as any trio of linebackers, with Levante David, Devin White, and Shaq Barrett, and then he's got Vita Vea in the middle, who's a 300-pound beast, just a beast in the middle. And you've got, Antoine Winfield in the back end. So they have talent across the board, and they're very active, and they're very good, and they're very stingy. Hopefully, with this extended time, the Eagles' offense has figured out some of the reasons why they have inflicted self-inflicted wounds. But I don't think it's going to be easy right out of the gate. They're going to have to figure out what Tampa Bay is doing, and hopefully they can turn it on. It won't be as easy to run against Tampa's defense as it was against Minnesota's defense. The Eagles are going to have to earn everything they get in this game on Monday night.
Yeah, with Vita Vea sitting right there in the middle of the defense for the Bucs.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. Well, D-Gun, I appreciate you making the time for us, my man. I will see you on Monday at the Ocean Casino. And, guys, you could check out D-Gun's show every day here on the JAKIB Sports Network with Rob Ellis. It's called Sports Take. What time do you air, D-Gun?
Noon to 3, Monday through Friday. We had Mike Quick on today, and tomorrow at 2 o'clock we will have Jeff McClain of the Philadelphia Inquirer, one of the writers that I have the utmost respect for in this market. Known him a long time.
Awesome. So, be sure to check that out, guys. If you're not already subscribed to JAKIB Sports, give us a like, give us a subscription on it, and check out Sports Take every day with D-Gun and Rob Ellis. We're going to take a break now. When we come back, we're going to have Dr. Chris Radcliffe breaking down some of these injuries to hopefully get some of these guys back on the field. Stay tuned. D-Gun, I'll talk to you soon, my man.
All right, brother. Be good.
There is a reason why the Garden Medical Spa, with 4 locations in New Jersey, has arguably the best customer reviews in America for a boutique medical spa. At the Garden Medical Spa, there is no fluff, just results. For the best in Botox, chemical peels, dermal fillers, hydrofacials, laser hair removal, and so much more, please visit thegardenmedspa.com. Book an appointment now in Voorhees, Sewell, Collingswood, or Northfield. Thegardenmedspa.com. No fluff, just results.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let JAKIB Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio, or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call JAKIB Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wild days.
Score and save in Southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, Birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com. EAGLES, Eagles.
Chris Radcliffe, orthopedic surgeon from the Spinal Disc Center. What's up, Dr. Radcliffe? How you doing, man?
Hey, buddy. How are you?
Not too bad. I'd be better if we weren't talking about all these damn injuries, but
Yeah. I'm like the downer, right? Like,
I know.
we
I
gotta
said
have a week with no injuries. We can just talk about whatever, Yeah.
I know.
Talk
I
about
said
our
at the
kids.
beginning of the show that you and I talked in the off season about you coming on, and hopefully we won't have to have you that often. Hopefully we won't have too many injuries, and it's game 2, and it feels like it's nonstop already. This was such a healthy team last year. But for those of
Yep.
you guys who don't know Dr. Radcliffe, Harvard University, Duke Medical School, used to be down on the sidelines with the Philadelphia Eagles. So he's going to be joining us every single week to break down injuries. But like you said, let's hope next week it's just to talk and catch up here. But let's jump right in, Doc, because there's a lot to talk about. Big news coming out of Thursday night was Avonte Maddox tears his pectoral muscle and is going to need surgery. But now there's reports that he may or may not be out for the entire season. Can you give us a little insight into that type of injury and what the recovery looks like?
Sure, of course. So the pectoralis muscle is obviously the muscle on the front of the chest. It helps to pull the humerus, the arm bone, in towards the front of the arm. Pec injuries are rare but are quite serious and quite traumatic. In general, they're treated surgically. There are a couple of different variations of how to do the surgery. It generally pulls off the humerus part. It pulls off the kind of where it's called the insertion, where it attaches. And essentially it's about a 10-month recovery, 10 to 12-month recovery. After that, people, I did a little research on this, and approximately 66% of people return to their pre-injury bench press strength. So, more than half of people do get back to their normal kind of baseline strength, but unfortunately, some folks don't. And either way, it's a long road for Avonte.
Yeah, so there were some reports that he's getting a second opinion and may not be out for the entire season. Is that something that you see as a possibility?
Sure, it depends on the extent of the tear. If it's a full thickness tear, then you need a high level athlete. You need a surgical reconstruction, and then he's not going to be able to play for 10 months at least. If it's a partial tear, then I guess it could be followed and rehabilitated carefully and judiciously. That that would still probably be a 3-month window of no playing at least, because obviously the concern is that if he has a partial tear and there's another injury, it could progress and become a full thickness tear.
So either way, not good news for Avonte Maddox and the Philadelphia Eagles here. So let's hope there's another
Absolutely.
guy. There's another guy in the secondary we talked about last week was James Bradbury in the concussion protocol, and you kind of went through for us what that concussion protocol is. For people who weren't watching last week, because now we got Boston Scott, I believe, in the concussion protocol as well.
Yep.
What
Yes.
do they need to do? What hurdles do they need to clear to be able to play on Monday night?
Sure. So it's a 5-prong approach, which I went through last week, and it's readily available online for viewers, and it's very evidence based. The first phase just involves like basic testing, and then the athlete has to be able to exercise, then to do sort of sport specific drills, and then to be able to do some light contact. And ultimately, it's supervised not only by the team physicians, but by an independent neurological expert. And the independent neurological expert, who's not employed by the team, is in fact employed by the league, has to ultimately clear the athlete back to play. It's likely, in my opinion, although I don't have data to support this, I guess that Bradbury will be back by Monday the 25th, because I think the challenge with Thursday was that it was such a short week that we just didn't have time for him to clear all 5 steps in time for him to make it. But obviously, I mean, although he had a concussion, he was able to walk off the field. He was still like kind of moving and somewhat conversant. So I would imagine that he's cleared the early phases of the concussion protocol by now, which is just, can you get through your day? Can you do basic stuff without having neurological symptoms? And hopefully he's returning back to at least some exercise.
Yeah, because from a football perspective, it'll be really nice to get James
Yeah.
Bradbury back against this wide receiver crew that the Buccaneers have with Chris Godwin and Mike
Agreed.
Evans.
Yeah, totally
Now,
agree.
a couple of guys are battling concussions. It appears that there's 3 players on the Eagles, all who have rib injuries. Fletcher Cox had a rib injury. He was able to play through it, but Blankenship and Kenny Gainwell were ruled out really early in the week last week with rib injuries. What could they be dealing with? And is that really just kind of a threshold, like a pain threshold type of thing, or is there more damage that can be done if they try to play?
So it's usually just a pain threshold thing. The ribs get contused. I would think if it was a rib fracture that they would have delineated that and clarified that. Rib fractures aren't treated surgically either, but they just take much longer to heal. But the problem is, obviously, in these guys' cases, I mean, if your rib is damaged, every breath hurts. And on top of that, I mean, a lot of the upper extremity movements affect the ribs because the lat muscles are back there, the pecs attach onto the sternum, which is attached to the ribs. So ultimately, the rib injuries really affect upper extremity function, movement, mobility, and even breathing. So if I would think if one of these guys has a bad contusion and is in a lot of pain, they're going to be impaired. There's some evidence that taping works really well for this. So like I'm sure the athletic trainers are now kind of just working on that. And I guess the taping gives some support to the ribs and kind of helps to splint that area and spread the force out a bit. So I'm actually optimistic that our 3 rib contusions will be able to return back also on the 25th.
Yeah, more good news, because if they can get Blankenship and Gainwell back, because This may be a tough question to answer, but we talk about Avonte Maddox's injury. He's a guy who's been injury prone throughout his career. Some of the knock on DeAndre Swift, as good as he looked on Thursday night, but one of the knocks on him has always been he continuously gets hurt throughout his 3-year career in the NFL.
Yep.
Is there something to be said for guys who were just injury prone? Is that a real thing that some bodies are just weaker than others that can cause players to be more susceptible to injury?
I don't think so. I think when you get to this level, these guys have been battle tested and sort of proven. I mean, certainly there are people who have bone diseases and soft tissue diseases like osteogenesis imperfecta. Remember that movie Broken a while ago, and people have soft tissue injuries like Ehlers-Danlos or Marfan's, which can predispose them also to injuries, but obviously these guys are in a whole different category, and they train substantially. I just think it's a reflection of the forces and the damage that they put their bodies through on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and there's another player on this team that's been playing through injury, and that's Hassan Reddick. We talked earlier.
Yeah.
I think we spoke last week a little bit about his thumb. He doesn't look like he's the same player the last 2 weeks as he was last year. He was just so dominant, really should have been in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. What are we looking at as far as when can he get back to 100% and hopefully be that player that we saw last season?
Yeah, it's hard to say. The challenge is that we're not talking about just a bruise going away or even a tendon healing. The problem is, I mean, it's his thumb. It's really involved in delicate movements and perception as well as sensation, and so just slight changes in the feel and force and slight pain, even with heavy contraction, can absolutely substantially affect thumb function. Now, I'm sure that he's doing detailed hand therapy, and I'm sure he has, stress balls and all kinds of other stuff to work on and try to get that dexterity back. But dexterity is a hard thing to develop and train, and it takes, it can take on the order of months. I think this will be a season-long project for him.
Yeah. That's not good news because we need this defensive line to really step up and cause some pressure on these quarterbacks because the back end is not necessarily our strongest on that defense right now. Well, another player who left Thursday night's game was Quez Watkins with a hamstring injury. And sometimes you see these guys, they strain a hamstring and it affects them all season long. How do you make sure that you're able to be fully healed from that hamstring so you don't re-injure it?
So I think time and rest is the biggest piece, and hopefully since we have kind of a long break, from Thursday through Monday, they'll be able to do that. I would think that he'll be limited participant in practice, at least kind of the first couple days, just to try to let that heal some more. Ultimately, most of these hamstring injuries are I mean, they're, as you know, they're very common, and most of them are kind of soft tissue sprain or strain injuries. They're technically, I guess, strains, which means that where the muscle attaches to bone, the fibers get kind of damaged and pulled, and thus it's not completely torn or ripped. It's just kind of like inflamed. I think ideally when that inflammation goes down, the real goal here would be to keep him from getting stiff or contracted. And so he should be stretching, I would think, but not necessarily lifting.
All right, last one for you, Dr. Radcliffe. We're going to switch teams here. We're going to go to the New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers blows out his Achilles, and the reports are now he's shooting to come back in the playoffs, which I think is ridiculous because I don't think there's a chance they even make the playoffs now. But any chance in hell that Aaron Rodgers would be able to come back from an Achilles injury by the playoffs for that Jets team?
No, I don't think so.
I thought you were going to give me the medical answer. Well, anything's possible. No, he's not coming back.
No. I think he'll be able to go, walk around like, Wawa, get himself a cup of coffee unassisted, but to be able to play at that level, I think it's going to be almost impossible. I mean, even though he's throwing with his upper extremities, but these guys are using their Achilles and their gastrocs to push off and pivot and force. And so I just don't think he's going to have that agility that's critical for him to be able to deliver the ball where it's got to go.
I'm going to put you on the spot one more time. Non-medical question. Monday night, Philadelphia Eagles, they're favored by 6.5, I think, right now. Do the Eagles win? And if they do they cover?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
And that's a medical opinion right there.
Yeah, that's my medical opinion. So I'm optimistic. I do think so. Yeah.
Well, guys, that is Dr. Chris Radcliffe from the Spinal Disc Center. He's going to be coming to us every week to talk about injuries. So we keep saying it. Hopefully we don't have a lot to talk to him about.
Yeah,
but it's been some bad luck over the last couple of weeks. But we're going to take one more break. When we come back, you're going to have just me. We're going to talk a little bit more about this Philadelphia Eagles team, and then we're going to look forward to the Tampa Bay Bucs game on Monday night and look at some of the matchups there. So stay tuned, Dr. Radcliffe. I'll talk to you soon, my man.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Awesome.
There is a reason why the Garden Medical Spa, with 4 locations in New Jersey, has arguably the best customer reviews in America for a boutique medical spa. At the Garden Medical Spa, there is no fluff, just results. For the best in Botox, chemical peels, dermal fillers, hydrofacials, laser hair removal, and so much more, please visit thegardenmedspa.com. Book an appointment now in Voorhees, Sewell, Collingswood, or Northfield. Thegardenmedspa.com. No fluff, just results.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let JAKIB Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio, or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call JAKIB Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wild wood days.
Score and save at Southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com. E-A-G-L-E-S. Eagles.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. NFL kind of messed us up tonight doing this doubleheader. Normally, we're here 6:30 to 8, leading you right into Monday Night Football. I know there's a game going on right now, so I appreciate that you guys are still here. But let's take a look at some of these comments. Appreciate all the support. One of the comments from Mark DeStefano was, has Derek Barnett seen the field at all? It's hard to know that he has because he's not done much, but he actually played 29% of the snaps against the Minnesota Vikings, which was more than Nolan Smith, obviously, was more than Brandon Graham. So the Eagles are still giving him opportunities. He just hasn't been able to produce, which is something we've gotten accustomed to as Philadelphia Eagles fans, unfortunately. And then we look at Matt Fowler. Gannon is a dumpster fire. He can't hold a lead to save his life. I'll tell you what, though, Matt, I agree with you. They had that huge lead against the New York Giants, but you do have to give Gannon some credit. He's got that Arizona Cardinals team playing hard. They were in both games to start the season. I didn't think there was a chance that they would even win a game this year. I thought that the Cardinals may have gone 0-17. They're going to win a game. He's got them playing hard. So you got to give Gannon credit there. But yes, he cannot hold a lead. He gets too passive, as we have seen as Eagles fans all too well. And then it looks like Botman saying Buda Baker for Derek Barnett and some picks. Buda Baker is a great player, and he would be an absolute beast on the back end of that Philadelphia Eagles team. But here's why it's not going to happen. It has nothing to do with what you'd have to give up to get him. The Eagles have the draft capital. Sure, throw Derek Barnett in. It's how much Buda Baker makes. And we know Howie Roseman doesn't pay the safety position that much money. Buda Baker is making over $13 million a year in 2023, and he's set to make over $14 million next year. And I would be shocked if Howie Roseman's going to pay a guy that much money. And the reason Buda Baker wants out of Arizona is he wants a new deal. So I can't imagine Howie Roseman giving him anywhere near that type of money. But guys, appreciate all of the support. Vinyl Vish Records, what are your thoughts on the new offensive coordinator? So we talked a little bit about that at the beginning of the show, and I think Brian Johnson needs to be better. I mean, that is an understatement that Brian Johnson needs to be better. He needs to get Jalen Hurts into some sort of rhythm. I do like what Brian Johnson did in that Vikings game. Once he saw that the Vikings were going to come out in that 3-3-5 look with their two high safeties, 10, 15 yards off the ball, run the football. He committed to the run. I love to see it. That's something you're going to have to do. You're going to have to set up the run to establish the pass, not the other way around. I know Nick Sirianni, they love the big play. Last year, they loved to throw the ball early and then run the ball late. This year, I think you're going to have to do things a little bit differently. You're going to have to run the ball early, establish the run, and that will set up the pass. But I think they'll get there. But yeah, that's something that's been concerning. Another question someone had throughout, I don't know where it was up there saying, hey, can you clarify what you mean that Jalen Hurts has no trust in the pocket? Well, what I mean by that is I went back and I watched the All-22 film. That is the best tape you can see, because when you're watching the game on television, what you see is really only what the camera is showing you in that small little section. A lot of times you can't see what's going on in the back end. You can't see the secondary. There it is. You can't see the secondary. So what I mean by that, Jalen Hurts had no trust in the pocket, is if you're watching the All-22 from behind, so you could see the whole offensive line, when Jalen Hurts is dropping back into the pocket, there is a pocket forming. He was looking at his first read, and if it wasn't there, immediately he was taken off. Instead of stepping up into the pocket, maneuvering around the pocket, you saw how good Mac Jones did against the Philadelphia Eagles, maneuvering that pocket, going through his progressions, and getting the ball off to the open receiver. That's something that Jalen Hurts needs to do better, and I think he will. And again, it's not all on Jalen Hurts. I think the Philadelphia Eagles need to be better in their play designs, because the play designs that they were throwing out there weren't necessarily effective against that too high safety look that the Minnesota Vikings were running and that the Tampa Bay Bucs will probably run. But let's jump in to Our last one, because Guy hit a nerve with me now. Guy Jr., what do you think about Michael Clay and the special team situation? I was irate last week about Michael Clay and this whole special team situation. I was shocked that the Philadelphia Eagles not only brought back Michael Clay this season, but they actually gave him a raise and an extension, which is insane to me. When you look at the special teams unit last year, bottom 2 in net punting yards, bottom 3 in kickoff returns against, middle of the pack across the board in punt returns and kick returns, and you bring back Michael Clay, and in week 1, you have to use 2 timeouts because your special teams unit doesn't have the right personnel on the field. And then you watch this game against the Vikings. They give up another big punt return, get lucky with a fumble. So, Guy, you're hitting a nerve with me, man. I am not happy with this special teams unit. I know they make a change at punter today. I'm not sure that is the answer. I think the problem is Michael Clay. Again, let's go back to some of the film. If you watch some of their pursuit angles on that special teams unit, on their punt returns, it's horrible. And I think that goes right down to just bad coaching. They're taking such horrible pursuit angles. You watch the gunners coming up the field, not the gun, but the gunners on the punt returns, and they are losing contain almost immediately. So that's something that really strikes a nerve. But let's jump in, guys. We got about 9 more minutes before we're going to sign off, and you guys could go watch Monday Night Football doubleheader tonight. But let's look at this Tampa Bay Bucs game. Monday Night Football, Philadelphia Eagles. We don't have a lot of 1 o'clock games this year, so another primetime game for the Eagles. The game is in Tampa, but all that means is the Philadelphia Eagles fans are going to be in Florida this week because we are going to have great representation down there at the Tampa Bay Bucs Stadium. I've been there for an Eagles game. It's awesome. Philadelphia always floods it. It's a cool stadium. You got the pirate ship and everything else. But I expect this game to be an Eagles victory, but I don't think it's going to be an easy game. I'm a little bit surprised by the 6.5 point spread. Same thing with the Minnesota Vikings. They opened up, I believe they were a 7.5 point spread. The number started to come down, but this Bucs team isn't bad. They don't have the same skills on defense necessarily that the New England Patriots had, but just because they have different skills doesn't mean that they are worse. They got a lot of playmakers on that defensive side of the ball. But offense, how much firepower do they have outside of Mike Evans? That's going to be the question mark. Can they put up enough points to compete with this Philadelphia Eagles team? But let's take a look. The Bucs are 2-0. They beat the Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears. Both teams are 0-2, but they're a well-coached team. You got Todd Bowles, former Temple coach, former Eagles defensive coordinator, but they have Baker Mayfield at their quarterback. And not a lot of people are fans of Baker Mayfield. I don't think he's a great quarterback either, but what he's done in these 2 weeks is effective. Don't lose the game, Baker Mayfield. Don't turn the ball over. And that's exactly what the formula has been for the Tampa Bay Bucs. They caused 3 turnovers against the Minnesota Vikings. They caused 2 turnovers against the Chicago Bears, and they turned the ball over 0 times. They are net positive of 5-0 in their turnover battle, and that is why they are winning the game, and Mayfield is doing enough to win. Last week against the Chicago Bears, he threw for 317 yards and a touchdown. If you were tuned in when we had Derek Gunn on the show, we were talking about Mike Evans and how good he is, man. 9 seasons in the NFL, and he has gone over 1,000 yards in all 9 seasons, and he is on pace after 2 weeks to put up 2,000 yards. That's how good he has been playing. And you look on the other side of Mike Evans, you got Chris Godwin, who's coming off back-to-back seasons with 1,000 yards. So those wide receivers are going to be tough to defend. We just talked to Dr. Chris Radcliffe, said he'd be surprised if James Bradbury's not back this week with that concussion. That is good news for the Eagles. You put Darius Slay on one side, James Bradbury on the other, and hopefully we're able to shut down Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I think the advantage the Eagles have here, as opposed to the Vikings and the Patriots game, is there's really not that third option like the Vikings and the Patriots had with their tight ends. The Patriots had 2 good tight ends in Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki. The Vikings obviously had TJ Hawkinson. The Bucs don't necessarily have a great tight end. In his second year, Cade Otton had 42 catches, 391 yards. He's playing okay. You heard Gunner say he had a decent game, but he doesn't have that playmaking ability that these other tight ends have. But they have an opportunistic defense. Just talked about the turnover battle. They've caused 5 turnovers in 2 games. Defensive tackle, Vita Vea. Linebackers, Shaq Barrett, Levante David, Devin White. At safety, Antoine Whitfield Jr., corners, Jamel Dean, Carlton Davis. These are all guys who were on that Super Bowl team that helped win a Super Bowl in 2020. I know they had Tom Brady as a quarterback, but they also had a very good defense. All these guys are back. And like I said, I expect same thing you saw Brian Flores do, the same thing you saw Bill Belichick do. They're probably going to run a lot of nickel and dime packages, 10, 15 yards off the ball, 2 high safety look. So I do expect the Eagles to run the ball more against this defense, but they do have a good defensive front and really good athletic linebackers. So we will see. Last year, the Bucs won their division, if you remember. They were 8-9, but they won their division. They were top 10 in passing defense. They were top 15 for rushing defense. So they didn't have a bad team last year. So the Eagles got to come out, take care of business. Hopefully we see the Philadelphia Eagles offense start to click in the passing game. But if I'm Brian Johnson, what I'm doing in this game is I'm coming out. Hopefully Boston Scott's healthy and Kenny Gainwell is healthy. And I am going to run the ball early with all 3 of those backs, DeAndre Swift, Kenny Gainwell, Boston Scott, and run easy routes to get the ball in your playmakers' hands. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith don't need to run go routes every damn play. Run some crossing routes, run some digs, run some slants. Get the ball in their hands. Do things to get the ball in their hands so they could pick up what everyone always loves, yak. We talk about yak. Get the ball in their hands and let them make plays. Same thing with Dallas Goedert. All of these lateral passes, these bubble screens, and stop. Get the ball on them, slants, digs, little passes to get Jalen Hurts into a rhythm. Mark DiStefano saying, hey, let's get some 2 running back sets. Sure, why not? But you have enough players on this offense, enough playmakers on this offense that you should see Jalen Hurts get into some sort of rhythm here. But that's up to your coaching staff to make that happen. Guys, I started the show with a trivia question. I don't think anybody got it right in the comments, but the trivia question was, in the top 10 for the Philadelphia Eagles franchise history of the most points scored in a single season, there's only one non-kicker in the top 10, and who is it? I don't think anybody got it, but I'll give you the top 9. They're all kickers. Cody Parkey has the most points in Philadelphia Eagles history for a regular season. David Akers holds the number 2, 3, and 4 spots. Caleb Sturgis at number 5. Jake Elliott at number 6. And then Akers also holds the 7th, 8th, and 9th spot. But who is at number 10? So who has the most points in a season for a non-kicker? Give you a hint. It happened in 2011. Not Steve Van Buren, FFA Explorer, a little bit more recent than that. 2011 with a 120 points on 20 touchdowns. There it is. Dank Kelly Green Burrito. It was Shady McCoy. LaShawn McCoy, most points in regular season history for a non-kicker. Guys, I really appreciate you tuning in. Like I've said before, I'm going to be coming to you every Monday night live here on the JAKIB Sports Network from 6:30 to 8. Be sure to like and subscribe to JAKIB Sports. Head on over to Legal Hands to the Face on all your social platforms. We're posting content daily. And on game days, every Eagles game day, I'm hosting the pregame show with Mark Farzetta, Seth Joyner, and Derek Gunn. Also do the halftime show with Mark Farzetta, John McMullen. Make sure you check it out live here on YouTube. Guys, as always, go Birds. Talk to you soon.
There is a reason why the Garden Medical Spa, with 4 locations in New Jersey, has arguably the best customer reviews in America for a boutique medical spa. At the Garden Medical Spa, there is no fluff, just results. For the best in Botox, chemical peels, dermal fillers, hydrofacials, laser hair removal, and so much more, please visit thegardenmedspa.com. Book an appointment now in Voorhees, Sewell, Collingswood, or Northfield. Thegardenmedspa.com. No fluff, just results.